Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Hey everybody, this is Thom. Before we start this episode, I just wanted to share with you that the first couple minutes, the sound is a little bit wonky, but it clears up and it gets really crisp, and you're not going to want to miss this episode. So please, bear with the little wonkiness, and it's going to be fantastic. Enjoy. Well, hello, and welcome back to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thank you so much for coming along on the journey of this show. We're almost a year old, and this podcast has been designed as a resource for those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society, it is a forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, and practices used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. Hey, my name is Thom Singer, and I have the honor to co-host this show along with Craig Brown, an industry veteran and a former PLM leader at General Motors. Hey, Craig, how are you doing today?
Hey, we're doing great, Thom. It's so good to hear your voice. We've had a few weeks of disruption thanks to the world events, and we decided to continue these podcasts. So we're happy to have somebody with us today from Europe, and we'll probably talk for a minute or two about COVID-19. But PLM goes on, and the ability to use these kinds of tools in a virtual workspace is actually quite important. And we'll talk a bit about that today, and I'm sure in the upcoming interviews as well.
Yep, absolutely. And every single week, Craig and I try hard to bring to this podcast really interesting interviews and other ideas that are going to help everyone enhance and grow their careers. And today is going to be really good because today we have Leon Lauritsen, and he is the Vice President at Minerva, and we're going to get deep into some fun stuff here. So Leon, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So, Leon, why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit about your background and what led you to what you're doing today for Minerva?
Certainly. I've been quite a bit around if you look at how my career has started. So if I go all the way back, first job was actually I programmed an ERP system from scratch in Visual Basic. So I've been on the other side in the transaction world. That was actually where I started the career. From that, moving into several different spaces with technology, both in supply chain, in lean manufacturing, also all the time dealing with complex software solutions for the discrete manufacturing industry as a primary thing that has been coming through my entire career. Then came into Minerva and continued there to develop also in management consulting. And then finally, I stepped into the PLM around the year 2001, and really was part of bringing the PLM practice from Minerva into Europe, where we started as primarily a Scandinavian company, but has grown ever since now with operating units throughout Scandinavia, of course, but also UK, Benelux, France, Germany, and now we are also present in the US as well. So that's a bit of my background.
So Leon, this is Craig. You mentioned the complex tools in manufacturing and supply chain. Do you think that's improving? What are your recent experiences? Is it getting easier to learn these tools, or is it still complex? And if it's complex, why is that?
I think it's still very complex, and there are several factors that are playing into that matter as far as I see. One thing is, of course, the tools, but if you look also at the kind of products that we are surrounding us with on a day-to-day basis, they are not, simple either. I'm sure you have mentioned before, you're coming from GM, just look at what a car was 25 years ago and what it is now, how many lines of code is actually inside a car, how much of the supply chain is actually quite complex. In the introduction, we mentioned COVID-19. Just think about how that has also disrupted the the supply chain for manufacturing companies as well. So I wouldn't say it has become easier by any means. Actually, the world around us is becoming more complex as we speak.
Well, yeah, and the current world events we're all struggling with on COVID-19 have both shown opportunities, if we can be optimistic for a second, but also shown the challenges. One of the opportunities is if you've digitized your company and you have PLM tools and ERP tools, and they hopefully have a portal through a device like your phone or your tablet or your home computer, then you probably keep your operation running, assuming you got a fair number of robots. Do you see other things happening as a result of the last month's events that our PM service, what I used to do and what you currently do, are helping this? Can we help make the workforce still operate even though we're all sequestered?
I absolutely think so. If I step a little bit back and I look into, I meet personally many companies all the time, all throughout Europe, even in North America as well. And even though the PLM industry as such is putting up a very big vision, where companies still are today is that, to me, they're still struggling with basic problems. Are maybe an overstatement, but they're still struggling with things where they are people dependent, meaning that critical information is still based on that they have to go and speak to John, or they need to get hold of Lisa because she has got an Excel sheet, or she has got a niche application for something. So I believe the issue has been that a lot of people, they have implemented a PLM tool, but they have not implemented PLM. So they have only taken a proportion of the challenges that actually are out there. And still today, they're sitting in a lot of meetings, they have to speak to certain persons. And I believe now with this situation we're in now, it becomes even more obvious, those kind of problems, that the information flow, the process flow of is simply not optimized enough in those companies.
Well, I think that's one. Another one is sometimes the characters you mentioned, John and another person, they maybe don't want to participate. And I've studied a little bit. Well, why don't they want to participate in PLM? Well, sometimes it's fear. They don't know where their responsibilities or their role in the new process would be. So I think sometimes they're reluctant to participate, meaning even just check their Excel spreadsheet in so it's easily shareable, right? Part of it's they're fearful. Part of it is, well, their spreadsheet's a work in process. It's not really ready to share because it's not complete. Well, that's a thing that PLM tools can really help with, is you can share intermediate results in a certain way, and then when you know you're stable, call that a configuration baseline and move forward that way. I think a lot of people, you and I might get it, and the vendors, providers, they certainly get it, but a lot of the operators don't appreciate even the liberation you can get if you would just start using the shared data backbone and so on. So I agree with you. It's not gone as far as a lot of us would have hoped. And when I study why, it has a lot to do with operator fear. Now, this current challenge we all face might just get through that fear. Sometimes it's the worst fear that you deal with, right? And so now all of a sudden sharing an Excel spreadsheet seems like a really good idea through email or through PLM, right? So
yeah.
You mentioned in your comments that we shared back and forth that it's a good sentence. I'm going to use your sentence. Why do customers continue to want to buy a fairy tale? Can you elaborate on that? Which fairy tale are they buying, and why are they still thinking about it?
Certainly, Greg. To me, the best way to explain it is actually to make a parallel to that. A lot of people, they don't want to have the brutal truth or hear the hard thing. It's a bit like when people, they have to gain a healthier lifestyle or to lose weight. Still, people today, based on commercials, they buy the pulver, the easy to eat aspects that they see in the commercials will in an easy way help them to lose weight and gain a healthier lifestyle. Even though they, of course, subconsciously probably know that it does not work, they still are really not that interested in hearing that, you know what, if you really want to sustain a healthy lifestyle, you need to change your diet, you need to get up in the morning, do your exercising, you cannot drink a ton of beer on a Friday like where we are today. It's hard work. So a lot of people, they prefer to hear the fairy tale that there is a quick fix and easy solution that you, Craig, you bring me my green button, and if I push it, it won't be a lot of hassle and it will just solve my problems. And that's still what we see a lot out there, is that you spoke about it yourself. PLM it's not easy. It's hard. And that goes both for the implementation, the organizational change, and finding the right tool that can support you. But people, they want to believe, I can just basically install this, spend 10, 20, 30 days on it, and then I'm good to go. And that's simply just not the fact. And it amazes me with the degree of complexity that we're facing in this world, that people believe that degree of a fairy tale, like with the dieting, that if I just buy this pulver, that will actually give me a healthier lifestyle. That's to me what is amazing me, that we have got so many smart, well-educated people out there, and a fairy tale.
So I'm with you. I find this debate interesting, and I sometimes wonder, well, who do I hold accountable? Is it the sales guys, or maybe it's the market guys who sell a vision, sell it as if it really is a green button, or is it more our culture we're always looking for quick fixes, which until our current health crisis came along, we all had it pretty good, right? If we did this interview 60 days ago, we'd be talking about process efficiency and how some people maybe just won't come along because they just can't change. And now here we are talking about, why are people looking for the easy button, right? So, some of the vendors we worked with at GM, and especially Aris, who we've interviewed on this podcast in the past, a couple of their principals, is they were very upfront about the amount of work, the fact that it wouldn't be an easy button. And then, in fact, we had to have the skilled people in our IT departments in order to be able to integrate their building blocks. From what I've read about your company, I think you help a lot of your different clients use Aris and their innovator platform. What are some of the best practices that you've seen that customers that get over this fairy tale problem, or in converse, what are some of the worst practices? I mean, are you just got some clients, without naming them, that just don't get it and they still want the fairy tale? So how do you manage this whole misperception?
It's a very good question, Craig. Unfortunately, sometimes you need to be a bit tough, and it's a little bit like when you are bringing up your children as well. Sometimes you need to be a little bit tough. So when you have told your son 3 times that the stove is hot and he's still trying to touch it, maybe he needs to touch it and experience it so he knows what it is that you're talking about. And it's a tough thing, but actually sometimes we simply have to do it, because there is a degree of knowledge and maturity also that differs amongst companies, where some, you simply cannot explain it. They have to experience, quite frankly, the pain first before you can have an adult conversation with them. I know it sounds harsh, but that is I like what you're saying. The key for all of the listeners is find the adults in the room and talk to them. It's very true. In fact, even our current crisis, at least my view of what's going on in our country in the United States, is there's an awful lot of discussions on what to do, and some people are still believing in fairy tales, even when dealing with a health crisis. So it's unfortunate. So for all you listeners, think about what Leon and I are talking about. It is hard work, and sometimes you just got to get busy and stay focused. Maybe on that note,
what would be your advice to people, Leon, on where to focus if they're new to PLM and adoption and so on? I mean, what are the things that, in your experience, would help people focus?
To me, it is you need to surround yourself with the right level of knowledge. Let's use again the analogy to the adults, as you said yourself, Craig. A lot of companies out there, they have still not experienced it, and they are drawing upon experience maybe from implementing Salesforce.com, right, or an ERP system in the cloud. And from my point of view, I've implemented both aspects, right? And there is a huge degree of difference, massive. So if you more or less are using your experiences, which is what people typically do, and want to use that on PLM, often they go very wrong. Because the nice thing, if you let's take ERP as an example. There are many standards in an ERP system that you can lean towards. You know, in finance, there is debit and credit. There will never be a third category. There is debit and credit. So you know that there is, some standards that you can lean towards. In PLM, when you really look throughout the life cycle, not just simple EBOM management or CAD management, there isn't those defined standards. They are not defined by external universities exactly. How do you document things exactly? How do you do changes? So therefore, it comes down to a lot of experience. And if you then lean towards that, you can buy that out of the box all the time, and it doesn't require a lot of things, and it's easy to implement, and then it fits, then you will have quite a bit of a difference when you start working with the system. That's at least my experience, right? And I've been in the world, not just with one PLM system, but actually multiple PLM systems we've worked with at Minerva. And we just see people underestimate the power of knowledge that you need to have in order to make the right decisions for you as a company.
That's a really good point. I as a mostly retired guy, I get to think about the last decade or so. And one of the things that I was always surprised about is the turnkey tool vendor. So out of the box, you just unwrap it and go. And then the executive customer side that would want to use that, right? The one thing they consistently do wrong is not understand the people that have the knowledge of the company and how it actually works. So you brought up enterprise resource planning, ERP, and the whole logistics side. And as you might expect, a car company does that, if they're still in business, does that pretty well, right? So it's hard for a commercial vendor that's purely an engineering background to come in and say, oh, well, we can marry or even replace your ERP system. Look at all the features I have in my PLM tool. And the experts, the knowledgeable people, just shook their heads and said, well, you don't actually get what we do. And so one of the things I've written a couple of papers on is exactly this point. You got to really understand, all of us, right? Whether you're a vendor or a consultant or the actual OEM, where are your knowledge pools and even the ones that make you competitively have an advantage over one of your peers in the industry. And then once you know where those are, then ask yourself, are there commercial solutions that do it? Or maybe there aren't. And so it's not time to go buy the fairy tale of a commercial turnkey system. On the other hand, if you're a brand new company, and especially here in electric vehicles around the world, there's a bunch of startups, right? If you're bringing together a bunch of people that have knowledge from different backgrounds, but don't have a consistent knowledge pool, well, buying a turnkey system might be one of the ways to get started, right? Because at least the big three or maybe the big four, right? And they know who they are. They probably have an out-of-the-box solution that's 80-90% correct for a startup. And I would encourage startups to take advantage of that, right? Don't go in and try to change it all, because it is able to be changed. But in fact, use one of them for a while and then improve from there. So it's interesting. Where's the knowledge? The knowledge is key, and knowledge in existing companies is sometimes hard to find, right? I mean, because kind of on purpose, companies keep it a secret, right? I mean, that's how they're competitively ahead of their their peer across town. So you had one other point in your comments to me about how requirements differ between geographic regions. Can you elaborate on that? And I presume you mean requirements for PLM, but
Yes.
what is it about the different regions? Is it about their economy, or is it about something else?
To me, let's start with something to give your listeners a different perspective. Let's talk about Europe, because there is a difference in how deep the engineering culture is defined in a nation. So I'm Danish. Our neighbor country is Sweden. If you think about Sweden, Sweden is only 10 million people. But even though they're just 10 million people, they have a company like Volvo, a company like Scania. They have done, buses, cars, trucks, fighter planes, normal planes. So the engineering culture in that company is very deep. And they've had a tradition, all the way for a very long time, both at Ericsson and Volvo, that new engineers, they were introduced to tools to work in a more structured way, like a PLM tool. So that meant that the maturity, again, so coming back to the knowledge is simply higher. The PLM maturity is simply higher in Sweden, in Germany, in France, than it is in other regions where they don't have the same degree of economy surrounding the engineering culture. So let's take Norway as an example, right? Or even my own country, Denmark. We don't have a huge engineering background. We've done a lot of agriculture. We've done a lot of design. We, of course, have got engineering companies, but it's not as deep as it is in Sweden. So you'll find their requirements, their understanding, their expectations to a solution is simply a lot higher than in other regions. Right?
Are they more willing to take something out of the box because of that regional difference?
I will claim that a lot of times, if we take Germany and Sweden, they don't believe as much in the fairy tale because they have burned themselves before, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Right. But you see a lot of the newcomers, they don't have that knowledge. They have not been through, and they haven't been schooled in the same way. It has not been a tradition, so therefore, it is not in the same way. And of course, there is industry differences as well. So take your own, PLM originated, as you know, Craig, from your industry, automotive, aerospace. So of course, that industry is very, very knowledgeable. But there are newer industries like, more simplistic electronics and high tech and those kind of industries where they don't have the same degree of knowledge. Like there has been built up inside, aerospace and the automotive industry. So therefore, you will also see industrial differences. And then, of course, also with region, there is also a cultural aspect where you see there is a big difference between US and Europe, right? And so when I go to the US and I frequently visit, or at least used to visit your lovely country a lot of times, but if you go to a grocery store, a lot of it is shrink wrapped, right? A lot of meals are shrink wrapped, and I'm sorry for maybe being a bit oversimplistic, but that's what I see in your country. So an American, as I see it, they expect to buy something shrink wrapped, or like with the car. The car, Greg, that, when you buy a BMW, you can configure it yourself. As a consumer, you've got thousands of options. Whereas in America, you get 3 or 4 fixed configurations that you can buy from. You don't want all of that configuration crap. You simply just want to have something that is defined for you.
Well, we could spend another hour talking about instant gratification, because it's interesting, right? Because build to order in Europe, especially in the car companies, is quite well known, but it takes you 4 to 6 weeks to get your vehicle delivered, right?
Yes.
In America, you want to go to the dealership and drive off that day, right? You got to have the instant relief immediately. So it's interesting. Well, Leon, in this climate, it's really wonderful that we were able to connect. We're still on different continents, so that's a good bit of technology. And also, it's good to see folks are still working. I would encourage all of you listening, we do have the benefit of being in an industry that we can do a lot of what we do from anywhere. And we do need to keep our economies moving as we come out of this terrible healthcare crisis. So, Leon, thanks again. And Thom, I think I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun to listen to. And Leon, I've got just kind of a quick question for you before we go, because you and Craig talked a lot about like finding the knowledge within the company, knowing who to go to. And you also talked a lot about the tech skills that people need to be able to use the systems. But I always like to take this back to the individual and their career. So what advice do you have for somebody who, they could be any age group, but they're newer to PLM and they're trying to grow their career? What advice do you have for them to navigate sort of the human side of a career?
For me, it's first and foremost, you need to be really good at understanding the business. And by the business, I don't mean the PLM business, but the company that you are working for. Because to me, ultimately, PLM is about solving business challenges. So being good at understanding how your business that you're working for, whether that would be a GM or another business, how that operates, what is important for that, what are the challenges in that company, so you can present solutions for that. To me, that is the most important part, because technology, it will change. But if you are very good at understanding how do you actually bring solutions to a business problem, you will always be able to grow your career. And people, executives, they understand to value the ones that solve problems, not speak about them, but actually solve them.
That's right. I always tell people, try to be part of the solution, not just the person who points out the problems. And you said something really interesting that, Craig, I think should become maybe the new underlying tagline of our podcast. And that is, PLM is about solving business challenges. I think that is awesome advice for everyone who's listening. So join us again. Again, Leon, thank you so much for joining us for, with as much problem as we've faced in the world, we're still able to log on and do these recordings with multi-continents involved. So I appreciate you being here with the time change and with everything else. And to everybody who listened in, remember, join us every single week for more thoughts, ideas, and information in and around product lifecycle management. The Digital Enterprise Society, it is the place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Check us out at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.